The latest rumor is that there are flirtations going on with the ACC and Stanford. The Pac-12 is cooked. The Pac-12 is done. Diesel's going to tell you a lot more about that today, coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. And there's some really troubling signs financially there for the schools that remain. However, what everyone assumes is going to happen now, right, is that the ACC is about to be picked off Pac-12 style. And the only thing keeping that conference together at this particular time is the grant of rights. Now, I will point anybody to the fact that a few short years ago, the Big Ten was in trouble. We knew that the SEC was always going to be fine. The SEC was always going to be safe. But a few short years ago, like the Big Ten was like 4th or 5th place in terms of bowl record, 4th or 5th place in terms of reputation, top 25 teams, etc. And then what did they do? Ohio State hired Urban Meyer, who then hired his replacement, Ryan Day. They're both fantastic. Penn State hired James Franklin. I don't think he's as good as some of you do, but he's good. I don't think he's great, but he's good. Michigan hired Jim Harbaugh, Michigan alum. All they've done is gone to back-to-back college football playoffs. And then suddenly you start to look at what conference has the best quarterbacks. Well, it might be the Big Ten. What conference has the best coaches? It might be the Big Ten. The Big Ten got to a place where a coach of Brett Bielema's caliber was able to agree to coach at a place like Illinois, right? Now, I was listening to the Jim Rome show, DA, Damon Amendolara, filling in for Jim today, hosting Brett Bielema. And Brett Bielema said something that I don't identify with. This is odd, folks. Weird story for you. Diesel told me before the show that he has a friend that played for Brett Bielema. And I told Diesel that I ran into Brett Bielema at a hotel in Napa Valley, California. All right. Had a vacation out there. This was, circa 2015, right? So 8 years ago. 8 years ago, had a vacation out there to Napa Valley, walked into the hotel. Brett Bielema was walking out as I'm walking in. Then our entire stay there, Brett Bielema was in the hotel bar every single night. I'm like, man, this dude gets it in. Gets it in completely. But he said something I can't identify with. He was asked, how do you feel about this expansion in the Big Ten? And he says, quote, anytime your conference can go coast to coast, there's not many conferences that can say that. Well, it's at last check, that's not, Brett, what college football is.
That's also saying something without really saying anything. Is that a good thing, Brett? Is that a bad thing, Brett? You got to be more specific on that. That is a non-answer.
Yeah, let's ask the student athletes who chose their college based on their family getting to see them play, right? How they feel about going from Oregon to Rutgers. How they feel about going from USC to Illinois, USC to Minnesota. These kids, many of them chose their college because their family would get to see them play in more games due to close by schools, travel, etc. Right? Folks, I like consistency, and college football is giving me a paint by numbers. I like geography, and college football is playing pin the tail on the donkey blind.
Which is why I think the SEC going divisionless is a terrible idea. I mean, look, we all know what going divisionless is about. It's about how can we get the new brands, Texas and Oklahoma, and there's a few schools who don't play Texas A&M very often. How can we get the two Texas schools in Oklahoma spread out to the other cities and the other stadiums in our conference quicker? That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to move those brands and have them playing games in those stadiums more often. But I'm going to tell you, if I was an SEC fan and I was an SEC East fan, I'd be pissed. I'd be pissed about this. Like, I don't give a rat's ass about playing Mississippi State more often. I don't care about playing Arkansas more often, especially if that means I play Florida or I play Kentucky or I play Tennessee less often. They are selling you a bill of goods. And man, it blows me away every time this conversation comes up, how college football fans of elite big time programs have just lapped this BS up and bought it hook, line, and sinker. Yeah, I want to play the teams that I care about less so that I can play the teams I care less about more. What the hell kind of sense does that make? But you guys are loving this, and I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah,
it sucks.
I'm with Diesel there. All right. So I got 3 points here. I like consistency. College football is giving me a paint by numbers. I like geography. College football is playing pin the tail on the donkey blind. And I like tradition. And college football is taking a blank canvas to the sport after 100 years. Our opening question to you guys today is this: what change would get you to walk away from college football? Is there one? Now, I thought about this. You're going to hear Brett McMurphy address this on the show today in the 520 segment. And this was written down on my rundown for Saturday's CBS show. Even before Brett McMurphy said what he did. And I'm not going to let that cat out of the bag right now. You'll hear it yourself at 5:20 p.m. But I will tell you this. To me, my answer to that question is if college football gets to the point where it feels like the NFL. You know, we just heard Brett Bielema say on this station as part of the Jim Rome show, well, you know, the Big Ten now goes coast to coast, and I'm not sure how many conferences can say that. And that's a good thing? Like the travel, the wear and tear, you know, like not honing in on your region of the country, right? That's a good thing. Colin Cowherd, in my opinion, the best sports talk show host in America, wins that just about every single year, wins that title. Last year was the first year that I think he didn't. Pat McAfee won it last year. Colin Cowherd was second. Says he's for it because the college football's problem is it doesn't have enough good games. He says, look at the Labor Day weekend slate of games. He was excited about 2. LSU and Florida State, and Colorado and TCU. And those were the only games he was into. But the reality is, folks, there's always in each time slot a good college football game. There's a good college football game at noon, 3:30, and 7. And then if you want to recover from your tailgating, you could watch the Pac-12 after dark very, very late at night, right? College football gave you that. Then I would tune into what was on network television on Sunday, and it's like every single week, the Jets and the Patriots. And I'm like, bro, I just watched LSU and A&M go to 7 overtimes, and you're giving me the 6-4 Dolphins against the 4-6 Jets. And I'm supposed to be excited about this? You know, I'm supposed to be excited about the NFL that is entirely about money versus college football, which at least back then in 2016, 2017, was only partly about money, right? The reason fans care so much about college football is because it isn't about money to them, right? I mean, that's the very essence of it. When you're going to a college football game, you're not thinking about money. You're thinking about the blood, sweat, and tears and the pride and the passion and the fact that the student athletes were kind of struggling the same way you were. Struggling to manage their time, struggling to manage their finances. It was a bonding experience for all of you.
Hell, Bryce Young did DoorDash as a freshman.
Yes. So, you know, if college football gets to me, ladies and gentlemen, if college football gets to the point to me where it feels like the NFL, then that's the change that could get me to walk away. And I'm going to channel my inner Dabo Sweeney here. If it's going to be pro football, I might as well watch pro football. To Colin Cowherd's point, well, it gives us better matchups. Look, we can get Oregon, Ohio State in the non-conference schedule, but when you get to your conference schedule, college football becomes regionalized, and that's a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing. All right?
But now it's the opposite. Now you're going to have to schedule your regional teams non-conference.
Isn't that weird?
And all these games that you're used to showing up towards the end of the season, rivalry week, those are now going to be week 2 or week 3 games.
I think the NFL, Diesel, has been proactive. The extra point is boring. The kickers make it 99.7% of the time. So we're going to change that. We're going to move it back. Now you can't run to the restroom when they kick the extra points because they could miss. Proactive is what you want to be, right? Constantly tweaking and changing, not leaving well enough alone. Major League Baseball has been reactive, which is better than non-active. They reacted late, but the changes they've made, shortening the games, etc., and that take 30 minutes off the game, the pitch clock, you can only throw over to first base so many times. They've been largely viewed positively. College football's behavior is destructive. Let's cannibalize ourselves, all in the name of greed, right? My mom was asking me last night on the phone if I could explain what's going on to her in layman's terms. And here's what I told her. I said, Mom, you remember my ex-fiance? And I lost the job in Tampa with Booger McFarland, and Booger and I got fired on the same day, and everyone got fired because there was a corporate merger. And then the new company said, we're not going to continue sports radio. So we got caught in a format flip, right? And then 2 months after that, my fiance said she's not really feeling attracted to me anymore. And it was one of the hardest periods in my life. In 8 months, I lost my dream job. I lost the girl that I thought at the time was going to be long-term. I lost a home. I lost my puppy. I lost all that stuff. In the end, it was a blessing because I didn't need to be with her anyway. And it led me to my gorgeous wife that I have right now, right? But she left because what I realized, she was into the title that I had. She was into the parties and the VIP and the status and the meeting NFL players and all this other stuff, but she really wasn't into me. See what I'm saying? She was about the glitz and she was about the glamour. The Pac-12 schools are leaving for the glitz and the glamour. You mean to tell me you can't operate on $20 million a year that Apple is going to give you? What were you operating on back in the 80s? What were you operating on back in the 90s? Apple was about to give you $20 million a year. Suddenly, it wasn't sexy anymore, right? USC, UCLA leave. It's not sexy. You did the same thing that my fiance did, my ex-fiance. And when I told my mom that, she said, I'm so glad you used that analogy. Now I understand it perfectly. So we ask you guys, what is the change? What would get you to walk away from college football? Could you ever imagine doing that? And folks, it's a tough question to ask. It's a tough question to ask. I love Josh Pate. I would love to see Josh Pate, who hates these changes, really get angry and tough about this. I'd love to see that.
I've listened to his show, watched his podcast a lot over the past 4 or 5 days. And with Josh, you always get no, things are happening that we don't like. But once toe meets leather, it's all going to be fine. No, Josh, it's not going to be fine. It's not going to be fine. And no amount of brushing it under the rug and saying, guys, just chill out. Once we have games, it's all going to be fine. No amount of that is going to change my mind. If I'm a Clemson fan and my team is pulled into the Big Ten, I'm furious. I'm furious. You know why? Because I, as a fan, will never, ever, ever see any of that money that the Big Ten is handing out. I will never see it. If it builds something on campus, guess what? It's probably going to be a building that I'm not allowed to go in. It's probably going to be some attachment, some addendum on campus, some building down the road that I, as a fan, am never allowed to go in. So I get absolutely nothing out of my team being pulled into a different conference, playing teams in Rutgers, Oregon, Southern Cal, Champaign, Illinois. I get absolutely nothing that benefits me, and I get screwed by not being able to travel to Georgia Tech, by not being able to travel to Chapel Hill, to Durham, to Raleigh. I get screwed as a fan. And there's so many fans on the internet just dancing a jig saying, this is great, guys. Don't you love where this is going? No. Because those fans only ever watch on TV, so to them, nothing changes.
So, yeah, like I would like to hear Josh get a little bit angry, get a little bit upset right now. But the reality is, if college football is being ruined, right, then what am I doing here? I'm in a college football market. Josh's bread and butter is college football. You know, his living is entirely on college football. Our living here is probably 70% on college football. It may be not smart business for me to say and admit on the air, I think they're ruining the sports. But folks, I think they're ruining the sports. You know, like, hey man, don't you want more good games? No, I don't want it to feel like the NFL. You know, college football feels special because every week matters, every game matters. Akron can knock Ohio State out of the playoffs. Think about that. Akron can do that. You're going to change that by expanding the playoff too far. Every region of the country has their brand, their style of football. That makes it unique, that makes it special. So no, Brett Bielema, I don't value that your conference goes coast to coast.